Hi chaps, we're going to talk about travelling today, particularly on flights, going through security, international travelling. A lot of this will also apply for domestic flights. So I'm going to give you some background to my travel planning. There will be some links to some more in-depth videos that go into great detail about connecting flights and that sort of thing. So I have a couple of people in particular who I follow who are excellent in giving you lots of really useful information, and they go into real detail, like every possible thing you might want to take with you on a flight. So links to all that kind of information will be in the description box. So let's start off with paperwork, because that's something you might have to prepare months in advance. So I have, for instance, here I've got a little case here that's got my passport in it and a print off of everything I need, you know, like for the flight details and any hotels and the ESTA visa waiver form. So if you're a UK citizen going to America, you have to fill in a visa waiver form. So there might be all sorts of official documentation that it's useful to print, even if it says you don't have to have a hard copy with you at the airport. I will still print them anyway, but obviously this is the sort of thing you have to do well in advance, especially your passport. If that's about to expire before your travels and you're going internationally, you need to check that your passport is replaced, renewed and within date in plenty of time. And there might be a time limit as well. In certain cases, you might have to ensure there's enough time left on your passport after you come back, and that changes as well. So this a lot of this information I'm telling you, it's always subject to change, and security regulations always change on a fairly regular basis. Well, I suppose it depends what it is, but you have to be aware that any information you come across, it is always subject to change. So yeah, I've come across cases where people have had trouble flying because although their passport was in date during the time they were away, it wasn't, the expiry date was fairly shortly after they came back, and it needed to be 3 months after they came back or something like that. So check things like that. I'm going to put a link to the TSA website in the description box, and that's got lots of information about, should have information about that kind of thing, but also the kind of things you're allowed to carry with you in the cabin part and what you can pack and that sort of thing. So a handy case that's easily accessible when you get to the airport with your vital documents, and I've got pens in there as well. Quite often you find you've got a form to fill in or something, and if you, especially on the plane, if you have to fill in a form on the plane and you're borrowing pens from the cabin crew, you know, yeah, it's always handy to have plenty of pens. I've always got a spare one as well. So yeah, check your documents. Another word on documents, actually, it's worth having, if you're a little inclined to be on the side of OCD, have another version that's on your phone as well. So I'll have an electronic version, you know, in case any of this gets lost, and ideally you can access them offline. So if you have no connection, you've got no Wi-Fi, or there's a network problem with your phone network, then you can still see your documents on the phone. So I suppose that's going possibly a bit beyond what's totally necessary, but it's nice to have that reassurance. You could even have more than one print off as well, have bits of paper in different parts of your luggage. Depends how worried you are about being able to get hold of proof of travelling or whatever. So, right. So let's move on to the kind of things I pack in my hand luggage. And you will need to refer to the TSA website as well before you fly, I suggest, because those sort of things can change as well. I have got, on this particular occasion, I'm trying to travel with fewer electronic devices, but I will of course have my phone. In this particular case, it expands out, and it actually acts as a support, so I can actually stand it up if I'm watching YouTube videos, something like that. So it's got slots for cards as well. But anyway, yeah, my phone. And I will have to have this in airplane mode, because I don't have, I'm going to have an American phone when I get to the States, instead of running up big charges on this phone. So I can use this for all my computing stuff if I've got a Wi-Fi connection, which I'm hoping to have on the plane this time. And so there's all sorts of things I can still use this for. This is basically my computer, and I can access emails and Facebook and Snapchat. So yeah, you can follow me on Snapchat and Facebook, all sorts of places. So, and I can stay connected as long as there's Wi-Fi connection. So this is the standard cable, which I think is about 3 foot, you get with an iPhone, and that's probably a fairly standard charging cable you get with most phones. But I have got a couple of other cables. Here's a 1 foot cable. You're going to wonder why I've got 2 different lengths extra. It's a 1 foot cable and a 6 foot cable. And the 1 foot cable in particular is useful for, the reason I've got the 1 foot cable is so I can plug it into my battery charger, and that's just like a nice neat little cable if it's in my bag, if I've got a small over the shoulder bag. So I've got down here, so I'll show you in a minute, I've got a small bag, and actually having a short cable is really useful. This is just the cable for charging the charger, so I'm going to make sure this is fully charged up before I go. So that'll be useful on the flight. And there might be a power supply in your seat, on the armrest of your seat, to charge your phone anyway, but just in case, always take a battery pack. This is a particularly large heavy one. You can get smaller ones, and there's loads of available. So I'm not necessarily going to recommend any brands or anything here in this video, but just to say, yeah, there's so many different types. So yeah, the 6 foot cable in particular is really useful if I'm in bed or sitting in a chair somewhere. I found it particularly useful in bed at home, because the standard cable is not long enough. If I need to charge it up, then it's a bit of a stretch. Yeah, so 6 foot cable is always useful as well. Yeah, just yeah, I just thought that's got to be really useful for that sort of thing. This is what I've got for a carry-on bag. I might have a different one, but it'll look like this. So a backpack, and this will have a change of clothes and some non-vital things in it. So my important documents will go in an over-the-shoulder messenger bag. So you are allowed a smaller bag, like a handbag or a laptop bag or something like that. So that's what this is for. Have all my gadgets and my important documents. So that'll be on the bag that's on the front of my body, and this can go on my back with just things like clothes and toiletries in it. I've got a smaller over-the-shoulder bag, which I'll pack inside one of the other ones. I might just use that when I'm in the States, just for sort of daily outings and stuff. But yeah, so you're allowed 2 bags, carry-on bags, your main one and a sort of smaller one for laptops, that sort of thing, or a handbag kind of thing. So yeah, that's my carry-on luggage. Then, now I want to talk about plugs as well, actually. So here is a standard UK plug. So if you're travelling to the United Kingdom, the power supply in regular power supplies from the wall sockets is twice the power than compared to US power sockets. So you will need an adapter. And actually, because so this is a square 3-pin plug anyway, so you'll need to and it goes for me as well travelling the other way, so I'm going to need an adapter that's got the 2 pins, the flat 2 pins for the American sockets. So make sure you've got the right sort of plug. But if you're travelling to elsewhere in Europe, they have different plugs. So this is a UK plug, not a Europe plug. So yeah, if you've got an adapter for, let's say, France or other parts of Europe, they're not the same as UK plugs. So check where you're going, what kind of sockets they have, what kind of plugs you need. Yeah, and if there's an issue with the power supply as well. But yeah, so that's something to be careful of. Other little gadgets, I've got my earphones. It's my iPhone earphones, and not sure if I'll bother taking this. This is just like a little support thing for my phone to prop up on the desk, but it would be quite useful to hang up my phone or something. If I'm recording from the handle of a cupboard, I can hang up the phone from there. Yeah, so that's my gadgets. That is all I'm taking in as far as, you know, electronic stuff. Right, so liquids. You will need to keep your liquids if you're carrying them as your carry-on items. There's a limit to the amount of liquid in a bottle, which is 100 millilitres, which I believe is 3.4 ounces. So this, for instance, is hand gel. This is antibacterial hand gel, and this bottle is only 50 millilitres. So you can take a bottle that's contains twice the volume. Here's a bottle this has got 75 millilitres in it. So you can see you can get a decent quantity of stuff in a amount of liquid for 100. So this is 75 and this is 50. So you can imagine 100 actually would be quite a useful amount of liquid. And so this as well. This is my bee's knees, not bee's knees, Burt's Bees, and it's my lip stuff. So this would have to be included in your gel bag. So you'll be given a clear bag to put all your liquids and gels in. So we'll include this sort of thing, and toothpaste, anything that's liquid or semi-liquid, or this kind of thing as well. These all will have to go in the clear bags. You can have your own clear bag, but I don't know if you might be requested to move it into one of their bags. So if you've forgotten to bring a clear bag, there are plenty at airports. They will have these bags you can put liquids in. I think you're only allowed one bag. There's a limit generally to how many items you can take. I don't know if you're limited to having one bag or if there's a certain number of items or something, but yeah. So yeah, be wary of, it's not just very runny liquids, it's fairly solid gel kind of things as well. And so I'm planning actually, instead of taking that, I have got a packet of these, and these are described as cleansing handy wipes, and they're antibacterial. Now the reason I thought this would be more useful, firstly it's not a liquid that can burst or anything else, not that it's likely to burst, but I can use these to wipe down if I'm worried about sticky seats, or if there's any germs on my space on the plane. I can use these to actually wipe down the armrests and the tray, even if it's just a bit sticky or something. But if I'm a bit more worried about germs or anything like that, I can use these on myself and my space around me as well. So these are really quite handy. I think this is more useful, I think, than one of those hand gel things. I might take both, but I think this would be particularly useful. And we have, so I'm talking about various toiletries, so sorry about turning around. I've got all my supplies here on the table to show you. So I shall try and look at you as much as possible, but I need to refer to my things here. So yeah, as far as toiletry things on the plane are concerned, I will always have painkillers. I've got two different sorts here. Paracetamol, which is a British type of painkiller, and ibuprofen, and they're quite often used for slightly different purposes. Some are better for certain types of pain. This is, I find, generally more effective for certain pain relief, and so I'll probably take both. So the three things, tablet type things, I'll take one of each of these, and some anti-diarrhea tablets as well. And you'll often find, if you're going out of your own environment, whether it's domestic or internationally, you might have a bit of a tummy upset, shall we say. So antibacterial, anti-diarrhea tablets. I've got the bacterial thing going around my head now. So yeah, diarrhea tablets are always useful, some sort of diarrhea tablets as well. So this will be my hand luggage. And as far as for your teeth are concerned, if you're going on a long haul flight, even if you're going on a short flight, but a long haul flight in particular, you want to be as fresh as possible when you're at the end of your flight, especially if you're being greeted by a friend. You might want to feel nice and fresh and everything else. So a toothbrush is quite useful. but I have come across this recently, and you might come across this in one of the videos I'm linking to in the description box. This is an alternative to toothbrush and toothpaste, and this is a pack of individually wrapped fingertip toothbrush, basically, and that's what that is. Yeah, so when I open this, I'm not going to open it now, but there's 10, I think, individually wrapped teeth, well, it's called brush-ups. So I think that would be a lot more handy on a flight than taking a toothbrush and toothpaste. But if you are taking a toothbrush, these are really quite nifty, quite nice. Just covers the head of the toothbrush. You know, stops it getting dirty and mashed up, whatever. You can get full length covers as well. So I do have actually a full length toothbrush cover, which is effectively like this, but it covers the whole toothbrush. And you know, so I think that's really actually rather useful, and certainly once you've used it, you can cover it up and it stops it dripping too much everywhere as well. So I think that these kind of things are really quite handy. Another liquidy kind of thing you'd have to declare and put in the clear plastic bag is one of these. It's called a revitalising eye roll-on. So the thing is, it's supposed to, particularly if you're looking rather tired or feeling tired, you roll it on. It's like a roll-on thing, just like under your eyes. So if you've got sort of very tired looking eyes, then yeah, so that's just quite nice. Whether it actually is quite effective, I think it probably is. It might be partly, I don't know if it's partly psychological, but it's got those kind of quite nice natural ingredients, which just I don't know, help wake you up a little bit and make you look a lot better, I think. So I'm not into cosmetics particularly or anything, but things like this, I don't know, I think it's quite nice. Just helps your eyes look a little bit better. And I want to actually move on to being hydrated. Actually, that reminds me of drinking enough fluid. And when you're flying at high altitude for a long time in particular, you are going to get dehydrated. You might not particularly notice, but you're going to need to drink more water than usual. So I suggest you buy a bottle of water after you've gone through security, because you won't be able to take more than 100 millilitres of water, which is useless for drinking. When you've gone through security, get yourself a bottle of water. The alternative is to have an empty bottle. So somebody, I don't have one with me, you can just have your favourite empty, your favourite sports bottle that you use when you're exercising or anything else, with a lid, and have it empty when you go through security. Otherwise it could be confiscated if it's got loads of water in it. Yeah, so take it through empty, fill it up at a drinking fountain in the airport, and they pretty much all have drinking fountains, so that'll save you spending money on a water bottle. So take one of those, make sure you drink plenty of liquid, and I would avoid alcohol because it has a stronger effect when you're up in the air, when you're flying at 30,000 feet or whatever. Alcohol has a more severe effect on you than if you're going to get drunk a lot more quickly. And yeah, so if you have one or two, it'll be fine, but just be aware that it'll have more of an effect on you than normal when your feet are on the ground. So yeah, a couple of ways there. So either buy yourself a bottle, and you will get offered plenty of water or drinks, soft drinks or fruit juice or water, whatever, when you're up there. But sometimes it's just nice to have your own supply. You don't have to keep getting up, disturbing people, calling the cabin crew all the time. If you've got your own water supply, then you don't have to keep disturbing people to get a... speaking of which, got my coffee here, so just hydrate my throat here before I carry on talking. So. In fact, I probably won't drink much coffee when I'm on the plane, although I'm a coffee drinker. That will make me want to use the restrooms more probably, because that's notorious for making me want to, go. So, yeah, drink plenty, but don't worry about having to use the facilities, because you should be getting up anyway. If it's a long haul flight, if it's only an hour or two, no problem really. But in my case, it's an 8.5 hour flight, and you need to stretch your legs, you need to get up and down. Even if you're not using the restroom, the on-flight toilets, you need to be getting up and getting your legs moving. And you have to bear in mind that your feet might swell. So that brings me on to something else. I've probably covered as much as I need to about the toiletries. Some of these other videos I'm recommending will go into great detail about all the possible toiletries, and there's all sorts of things. One of them in particular is talking about with feminine hygiene as well, the kind of things that you might want to take, and makeup, some makeup ideas as well if you wear makeup all the time. Maybe just some essential things, basic items you might want to take. But yeah, just getting up and down leads me on to something else to do with your feet, about ankles in particular. So some of you may be aware of this experience before. So think about what's on your feet. I will almost certainly be wearing my trainers, as we call these trainers normally in the UK, but you might know them as tennis shoes or sneakers maybe, or something like that. So I'll be wearing these, but I will also have my Crocs, because actually these are more comfortable on the plane, and they're quite loose fitting. They don't come off. The first time I got these, a pair of these, they felt quite loose, like they were going to come off all the time, but they don't come off. I've like shaken my feet quite rigorously, and they do not come off. They actually stay on pretty well, but they're nice and loose fitting, and actually that's really nice to have when you're on a flight. But I use these when I'm in hotels and things anyway. They're really useful if you want to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, or there's some fire drill you have to evacuate your room. Just slip these on. You're not spending 5 minutes trying to do up your laces with a smoke-filled room. Just shove these on your feet, and these are excellent. And actually I use them also, just want to go down to breakfast really quickly, shove on some clothes, put these on, go down to breakfast, and change into my other lace-up shoes later. But I find these incredibly useful, so really useful for the flight. I might even go to the airport and just wear these all the way through, and just pack the laced-up shoes in my carry-on, in my my checked-in bag. So I don't know, but definitely going to have these on the plane. And I have been known to walk around the cabin just in my socks, which is not necessarily recommended. In fact, they probably prefer you to wear shoes, I'm not sure. But Crocs, great idea, something like that. They don't have to be the brand name. There are plenty of alternative, cheaper versions of those kind of shoes. So how do I entertain myself on the flight? Well, I like my gadgets. I'll have my phone with me and hopefully Wi-Fi connection. I'll be doing things like posting pictures of the airline food, playing Candy Crush, and using the in-flight entertainment, so there'll be a screen on the back of the seat in front, watching movies, TV shows, that sort of thing. I'll be stretching my legs, getting up and down a little bit, and I have an aisle seat deliberately so I can get up and down easily without disrupting people. And yeah, so how do you like to entertain yourself? A really popular choice by a lot of people when I was asking around was reading a book. I'll probably buy a magazine, almost certainly get a magazine. I like to browse the magazine racks at airports before I get on the flight. So yeah, I like to browse that. I like lighter reading, like magazines for flights. And so a word about music as well. So if you have either an iPod or music on your phone or some gadget for listening to music, I suggest you create a new playlist, put some new songs on there, rearrange your music. So you might really like the music you normally listen to, but it's a great idea to actually just change that a bit, just make it more interesting, have a new list of songs on there, and it certainly makes a difference. So that was a top tip I heard from somebody else. Another quick tip about taxis as well. So yeah, total change of subject here. So taxis, if you're going to a totally different part of the world and you're relying on taxis, even if it's just from the airport to your hotel and back again, get an idea of how much it should cost you. A lot of people have been ripped off with the charges for a taxi because the taxi driver will easily quickly work out that you're not local, And yeah, a lot of people have been charged far too much for a taxi ride. So check out first how much it should cost you, roughly, and even agree a price. Just check with him before you start the journey. Yeah, I've heard so many stories about people who've paid far too much for a taxi ride because they just pay however much the taxi driver says it costs. So make a note of that as well. Or, you know, check with the taxi driver how much he wants to charge or something. But just make sure you're not overcharged for the taxi rides. Right, snacks as well. Although on long haul flights you're going to be given plenty of snacks and food, and you'll get given at least 2 meals. On an 8-hour flight you'll have perhaps a main meal. There might be a lighter meal as well at some point. But it's great to have your own snacks just for, you know, keep your energy levels up and stuff. So I've got some things here. And I hope I'm not going to get through all of these on the one flight, but just got a variety of things to take with me. So things like fruit and dried fruit and nuts will be fine. You know, so I've got here is cashew nuts, one of my favourite kind of nuts, cashew nuts. And I tend to go for ones without salt. I'm not for ones for salted nuts particularly. And these are Brazil nuts. Chocolate coated Brazil nuts, and I've got some yogurt coated raisins there. So that's quite a lot, and I'm not anticipating getting through the whole lot because they will be feeding me on the flight as well anyway. And some people will recommend protein bars, so you can get these like snack bars but like protein bars. They're full of energy and things like peanuts and what have you. I think they might be quite high calorie, but I suppose maybe that's the idea, is it gives you a lot of energy. So you might want to think of that as well. Yep, so they're quite useful. So actually there's one other sort of electronic kind of thing that I forgot to mention. This is like a little microphone that I'm just taking. So this one is a clip-on one. So I can just clip that to my shirt or something, or just hold it. And what I like about this particular one, the reason really why I got it, is that it's got a little spongy bit on it. So if I'm recording outside, you're not going to get the that gushing wind sound. You know, when people are recording on their phones or camcorders outside, and you can barely hear them because of the wind and the breeze. Even if it's not much of a breeze, the microphone really picks it up. And so if you can cover that, got something like this. And in fact, Margaret, if you follow Margaret Olander, she's got one of these. And I think I mentioned like ages ago something about I get this whooshing noise. You said actually what you can do if you don't want to spend the money on something like this. This is actually not too expensive. It's quite cheap actually. You can get all sorts of different ones. I'm not going to necessarily recommend a brand as well again for this, because you can get all sorts of ones. But what you can do if you don't want to buy something like this, just cover the microphone with some tissue or you know, cotton wool balls. I don't know what they call them in the States. In the UK they're called cotton wool, and it's kind of like candy floss. You know, it's just it covers up. You just need to cover up a little bit the microphone, not so much that it can't pick up the sound, but it will help prevent that whooshing wind sound over the microphone. Right, so that's most things here. So some people need to know, they like to know what kind of food they can take, and if they ask you at security, have you got any food items? It might be one of the questions on an immigration form that you have to fill in. They want to know what you're bringing into the country, how much money, if you're bringing in tons of money, and if you're bringing in any food and that sort of thing. So quite often a white form you have to fill in if you're from the UK going to the States. And some things that you are allowed, definitely, because I do it almost every trip, are packets of biscuits and some British sweets. So things like these. So Jelly Babies, pre-packaged commercial sweets, pre-packaged commercial biscuits. So things like this are perfectly fine. You've got chocolate, you know, those things that you've got, a lot of things you bought at the airport, might be buying for friends, whatever, perfectly fine. What you won't be able to take, things like fresh meat and dairy products. You probably don't want to take those on a long haul flight anyway, because I dread to think what state they would be in by the time you get to the other end. But anything that's commercial, pre-packaged like that. I am not sure about homemade items, so if you've got, let's say, homemade chocolate brownies and stuff, they might be fine. But I know if you've got commercially bought stuff, which those are the kind of more popular things you might be taking anyway to take to people. You know, those kind of items are always more popular. Going from one country to another, you take with you things that are popular in your country, but not they're not known at all in where you're going to. And you know, everyone talks about sweets and biscuits and cookies or whatever in different places, and they're always great fun. But those sort of things are no problem taking into another country. So I tend to declare those actually anyway, you know, whether I should really bother, but I'd like to, because they are food items, and they will say, oh, no problem, you know, this kind of almost brush off the fact that I've sort of said it, that, yeah, no, that's no problem. But I like to declare them because they are food items, but you know, just like to be upfront about everything, and you really have to be very careful going through security. It's the kind of time that you don't want to make jokes with the security guys. They ask you questions when you're about how long you're going to be staying for, when you're leaving. You don't want to crack any jokes. The last thing you know, they've got a serious job to do. They might, you know, they might have a nice friendly conversation with you, but it's a serious matter. And obviously at the moment there's a lot of heightened security. There was that event in Istanbul recently, and there's always something, there's always rumours of things happening, and security naturally has to be tight in airports. So this is always a sort of serious part of the travelling. Just be upfront and honest and straightforward with anyone you speak with. And yeah, so that brings me on to other security things. What can you take? So I've got a lot of people obviously who are knitters and crocheters and want to know if they can take knitting needles, crochet hooks on flights. I'm going to be packing some wool and projects in packed in my carry-on, not in my carry-on case, in my checked-in case that goes into the hold. So. But we need to know if we can take crochet hooks and knitting needles on the plane. So that is something you need to check. Rules might change, and but generally speaking, yes, you can take knitting needles and crochet hooks on flights to actually work on a flight. And scissors have to be, the blade on scissors has to be no more than 4 centimetres. You will need to double check this on the TSA website. In case it changes, and but even then, whatever the regulations are, whatever the official guidelines are, it all comes down to the security guys when you go through the security, the place where you take your shoes off, you know, your belt off, and you put your things on a tray, goes through an X-ray machine. They're checking for dangerous things, and they're on alert if anyone is acting suspiciously as well. And if they decide they don't like the look of something that you're carrying, regardless of what the website says, whatever the officials say, whatever the airline has said, you might have checked already with the airline and officials and at the airport, whatever. When you go through security, if they don't like, if they're not happy, totally happy with something that you're carrying, they are within their rights to actually remove that item. I've heard of people having an envelope with them to send off you know, back home again or something, instead of actually having the thing totally confiscated. I'm not sure if that works. I don't know if they're happy to send that off for you. So that's something to think about. But if you don't want to lose a valuable heirloom hook that belonged to your grandmother, for instance, or something, or particularly expensive knitting needles or something, then I suggest you don't take those anyway. If you're one kind of thing I've heard people say they will often pack wooden crochet hooks, for instance, in a pencil case with some pencils, got a, you know, crochet hooked. But generally speaking, I've never heard of anyone having stuff confiscated going between the States and the US. Going to Australia, I've actually heard more stories about people coming and going to Australia and that part of the world, sort of down south, down under. There's more people who've had problems with things actually being confiscated, knitting needles and crochet hooks, possibly, definitely knitting needles, going through Australian customs. So yeah, you want to check, but just bear in mind, whatever the official guidelines are, whatever the websites say, whatever the airline says, and whatever the airport security people might say before you've gone through security itself, if you've spoken to anyone else and read whatever that you are allowed stuff, it still is down to the security guys that check you when you're going through the actual X-ray machines and stuff, in all the security, the actual official security bit. Yeah, so bear that in mind. Okay, so I think that's probably everything I can say from my experiences. If you're changing flights, so if you're going on a long haul flight and you're changing to another flight, give yourself plenty of time between flights. I had one flight in particular where I was changing at Chicago, I think it was, and it was all done through Expedia, so it was done as one booking through Expedia, and I was going from London to Minneapolis and going through Chicago, and I had an hour and 40 minutes to get through, and I thought that might be pushing my luck because I could be in immigration for an hour. I then have to pick up my case, collect my checked in case, recheck it in, go through security again for the other flight, and had to find the other gate. And I was thinking this might be cutting it fine a bit. I didn't think it'd be too bad, but actually, as it happened, by the time I'd gone through security, immigration, that took an hour, or almost an hour, and by the time I'd done all the other bits, collecting my case and getting to the other gate, I arrived at the other gate at the time the flight should have been leaving. So it did take that hour and a half to get to the other gate. Luckily for me, the flight that I was supposed to catch, it was late coming in from the previous trip, and actually I did get that flight, but only because it was late. The knock-on effect, it was coming up from Dallas, I think, or something, and I was just lucky it was late and I actually caught that flight. So you want to make sure you have plenty of time between flights. The next time I flew, I had exactly the same problem. I had an hour and 40 minutes, so I actually phoned them up and I said, like, last time I had this hour and 40 minutes, I nearly missed the flight. And they said, oh, it should be no problem, you know, they recommend an hour and a half between flights. And I thought, well, it's kind of, you know, from my experience, I could have easily have missed that first flight, that connecting flight. As it happened, just like about a week before the flight, they changed something, and I don't know if it's because I made a comment or there was a change to flights. Sometimes they have to change a plane and the plane size, and actually if the plane size is different, but the time, you know, if you're, they have to actually reschedule a flight sometimes if the plane size is different, because the time difference between takeoffs is different depending on the size of the plane, because the airflow behind the plane is different depending on the size of the plane. So if you've got a really large plane, they have to have a longer gap before the next plane takes off, because of the effect of the airflow behind the plane. So the smaller planes, you can have a smaller gap between the planes if the plane, because there's less disruption in the airflow behind the plane. So that can make a difference if they decide, oh, we've got a lot of passengers who want to fit on at about that time. If it's a bigger plane, they have to actually give it a different time slot or something because of, anyway, that's probably more information you need to know. But you have to really just be aware of how much time there is between flights if you're, especially if you have to go through immigration or something. So check out the videos, definitely check out the videos in the description box that I've linked to, because they go into enormous detail about things. The technical problems might not be problems, but all the information that they've gone into a lot more information than I have about packing, what to pack, and planning your trip. So Girl Traveller in particular, she's a solo woman traveller, and she's done a lot of long haul flights. So she's Asian background, but she's American, I believe, and she travels a lot to the Asian part of the world. So she does a lot of long haul flights and transferring, and a lot of planning goes into her trips. So she's definitely worth checking out. And then, yeah, I've got some various other links you've got to check out as well. There's a really nice guy that I follow called Explore List. He's an English guy that is travelling the world, and he gave up his desk job and So you might want to check him out as well. So he's got some really useful, tips, and he's really good fun to watch as well. So I'll link to his channel in the description box. So I think I shall leave it here. And there's a lot of stuff really I have not included I could have done, but I've just gone over some of my basic sort of information and packing tips and stuff and travel tips. But you really need to check out these other people and definitely keep up to date with your information. So information about travelling and official guidelines can change at the drop of a hat almost. So I shall leave it here, and so bye for now.